Hello, you guys.
And welcome to the Women's Cave. Thank you for being gracious today, Winona.
We once again have a champagne treaty, therefore I am behaving.
She only has a treaty because yesterday, because she didn't want to have a treaty, and then I had to let her know I just ordered the new box of champagne, like the new case of champagne, and she was like, oh, wait, I need to behave. Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's nothing like a champagne bribe to make me behave.
I know, but okay.
Anyway.
Y'all, I'm just going to say this. I mean, I'm going to break protocol a little bit, but I feel really smart today.
Oh, yes, because we have a smart person in the room, and, she's going to talk, and then that makes us smarter by association.
Yeah, by association. That's how it goes. That's That's exactly how it goes.
But in the meantime, I'm Winona.
Oh, and I'm Jade. Okay.
You pull the elbow for the professional on my part. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know. Did I ever discuss how I had to cut back on my coffee intake? And so I've been a little sleepy for the last couple of months, but now I'm back. I can be back on my regular coffee intake. This is amazing. I love caffeine.
So maybe not all the caffeine, the energy that Jade is talking about will show through because apparently we have a delay.
Oh, yeah, we do have a delay. So if
our mouths are moving, but words aren't coming out.
Well, I think people like it. Like, oh, look, the mouths are moving, but they're not really saying anything. They're like, yay, that's exciting because they talking about it. Anyway,
we wrote books. That's why we stopped talking and started writing.
Absolutely.
The literary life guides with pop poetry.
Oh, my goodness. We are getting so good at this. One day in 25 years, we'll be professionals.
Okay, but we'll be ugly.
No, we'll not. We'll be retired. How about that? I'm retiring early.
Our first book, Jade.
Okay, yeah. So, And I Thought Divorce Was Bad with Other Life Lessons, available on Audible and Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then the second book, Grown Up Was Easy, will soon be an audiobook. It's been 2 years, but Joe did an amazing job.
Of course.
Wait to buy the audiobook. And then buy the flask so you can drink it while
while you're
listening.
You can fill it with water because you don't have to fill it with anything but water.
And there's the other 13 books in the And I Thought series. Moving on. See, I'm being
yes, you are. And we have the Misfit Guys, like Sassy Sway that leaves crooked fingerprints. And then we have one of our only all poetry books, which would be If Only I Were Me, only available on BarnesandNoble.com, or you can kind of come to our website, andwethought.com, and kind of click the picture and then go on over.
I said, no, I'm going to skip the word. Indie authors, artists, and advocates. You can pick that up. It's 196 pages long. If you have your family living with you and you want to ignore them for a while, 196 pages will do it. You can be like, shh, I'm reading.
I'm reading.
And it's only
magazine. I need this for my job.
Yes, exactly. And it's only $7.50. Is that it?
Yeah. And then you can always check out everything your latest going on www.andwethought.com.
That was
Coffee
way too professional.
Coffee.
But anyway, you're not here to hear about us.
You're here to hear about wonderful, smart guests.
Smart, wonderful guests. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kim Roberts, and I'm the author of 5 books of poems, most recently The Scientific Method, which came out in 2017. I also am a literary historian of writers of DC, and I have a book that came out in 2018 of literary walking tours, a literary guide to Washington, DC, like my visual aids. And I have a new book that's coming out in October I'm very excited about. It's an anthology of early DC poets. It's going to be called By Broad Potomac's Shore. Great poems from the early days of our nation's capital. That's going to be released by the University of Virginia Press in October, but it is already available for pre-order. And if you want more information about any of those books, my website is www.kimroberts.org. And Kim Roberts is spelled exactly the way you think it is.
I love it. First of all, I love that she bought the book. Because so many people tell us titles, and then it was like, go get the book. Like, show us the back cover, the front, open it up, show us like this show, you're supposed to be like, book.
Yes.
There you go.
Absolutely love it. I love it very much. It's so great.
So have you thought about trying out for models, to do the Price is Right? Because, I mean, you did the book thing perfect.
Yeah, I always wanted that, the Carol Merrill position where all she does is like, stroke refrigerators. Yeah, I could do that.
I think so. I think you'd be great for it.
Yeah, you would. You would. I think
honestly, I think you'd be overqualified. You would show up, show them like I'm an author, and they'd be like overqualified.
But that's lovely. I love to be overqualified for something. I'm like, woohoo! I'm overqualified.
But you can still pay me anyway. Let's go. Okay, no, we promised serious. We promised a serious show.
So,
may I ask a question before we get really serious and into literature? Do you mind? Okay. So you also started something in DC too, right? Like book festival sort of thing, or am I wrong?
No, you're right. I've done a number of projects. I was the festival director of a Walt Whitman poetry festival that was sponsored by Humanities DC. I also co-edit a web exhibit with my friend Dan Vera called DC Writers' Homes. We're documenting where in the city writers have lived. And for 20 years, I edited an online literary journal called Beltway Poetry Quarterly. And I just retired from that at the end of last year. I figured 20 years was long enough. So that is still going on, but has brand new editors.
Yes, Sarah's awesome. The managing editor for poetry, we interviewed her and we were like, oh, she's fun.
Terrific.
And then she mentioned of course, we had to go like, who's that?
Also, since we are here now and we are going to be professional, today we're going to talk about writing.
Actual writing, go figure. So first question, when people are writing poetry, do they just always have to be rhymey, or are there different types of poetry?
Oh, of course, yeah. So there are a whole range of traditional verse forms that have come down to us through different cultures over long periods of time. And I wanted to talk a little bit about those traditional verse forms, but all poetry has musical elements to it, even if there's no pattern. So what we call free verse is just a poem without a metrical pattern or a pattern of refrains. But there are forms that come to us from all over the world that have these long histories that are really interesting to me. And I did want to talk a little bit about, why would you bother to write in these old-fashioned traditional forms? I have always written both formal poetry and free verse poetry. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm somehow against free verse. But I think it's really important for writers to learn some of these traditional verse forms. It's sort of like painters doing a kind of internship in drawing before they, it's learning your chops. It's learning some of the skills that go behind whatever makes the art form. And so I think even people who have no intention of ever publishing anything other than free verse should still try out writing in these traditional verse forms. I just think it's good for tuning your ear, because the ideal poem, if there is such a thing, should be a combination of both content and song elements. So the content is what it says, but the song elements are how it says what it says. And, in an ideal world, they would be equally important. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh, no, it does. So you're basically saying poets should learn the rules so they can break them. Yeah. If that's what they choose to do.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
had to learn the rules so you can appreciate all poetry,
Right.
and not just free verse. But I love the fact that you said it should have that element, because that song element is kind of like the written way of feeling that you would have in like a musical run. You hear a run, it kind of just hits your heart. If you're from certain places and you hear runs, it hits you here, and then it makes you feel and move. Yeah. And that's what poetry should do. But you should also have the technical base foundation. Continue, because you are the.
Language is a musical form, and poetry and song come from the same ancient. They come from the same place in pre-written history, and those song elements are what bring the pleasure in the poem. So, and this is true in free verse as well. You know, language is musical. Because we have soft stresses and hard stresses, we have certain sounds. If the sounds repeat, that's pleasurable to us. We recognize it as intrinsically pleasurable. And the interesting thing about this is that you can use form to increase the pleasure of a subject matter that's already full of pleasure, like a love poem, but you can also use those pleasurable song elements to work in contrast to whatever the subject matter is. And in some ways that can make a poem that's really difficult or sad even more poignant, because you have that clash of opposites happening in the poem.
So do you have any examples of that poem?
Well, sure, yeah. You know, traditional verse forms that most people have heard of would be things like a sonnet, maybe a sestina, a villanelle. I don't know if any of these forms are how familiar your listeners are going to be with these forms. But I think that I will start with a pantoum, if that's okay with you.
That sounds good.
A pantoum is an ancient Malayan form, and it does not have to be metrical. You don't have to count the number of hard stresses and syllables. But what's important about a pantoum is that it has a lot of repetition. So a pantoum is written in 4-line stanzas, and lines 1 and 3 of, lines 2 and 4 of one stanza become lines 1 and 3 of the stanza after it. So that is a lot of repetition of the lines. So you need to have subject matter that is a little obsessive to make this form work right. I brought 2 examples of pantoums that I've written. I think I'll read the more recent one. So on the page, you can see we've got these 4-line stanzas. And shall I just read it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Got to put on a different set of eyes. I come from a family that was involved in the textile industry, and have been trying for a long time to write poems that reflect that family history. So this is called Looming. It's not just the looms, it's what's looming. The row of women arched over their machines like colorless rainbows. Their smaller hands make them ideal for this kind of work. Managers keep their wages depressed. The rows of women mooned over the machines don't complain. The supervisor tells me they are ideal for this kind of work. He yells through a shattering wall of hard sound. The managers keep wages depressed as waves of humid air keep fibers from splitting. No one complains. The supervisor talks through his teeth, a simulation of a smile, through a shattering wall of hard sound. They get used to it in just a week or two. The waves of humid air, fibers and noise splitting. It's not just the fibers, it's the whole fabric. The sight of his teeth in that simulated smile and his reassurance that the women like it, that they get used to it in just a week or two. These colorless rainbows, their smaller hands bear every thread. They carry the whole fabric. It's not just the looms, it's what's looming, and his reassurance that the women like it.
Wow.
So I hope you got a sense of all of that repetition. You know, you're hearing the same lines over and over. I mean, any traditional verse form is going to have echoing. That's the nature of this. So the echo could be just a sound, like consonants, where you repeat the first sound of a word. The boy bounces the ball. Or it could be rhyme, which is an echo of the end of the word, that sound. But this is an entire line, and it's used, every line is used again and again. I find putting these together, it's like a little puzzle piece. You know, I find once I start them out, if they're working, it just almost like writes itself. If they're not working, forget it. It's never going to work. But if it's working, there's something sort of magical about what happens. And of course, since every line is used twice, you only have to write half the poem. The other half, you
I was
just have
thinking
to.
that. Definitely thinking that. I was like, it sounds like less work if you can just finish the end. I'm sorry. I'm the lazy one too. So
She's not lazy. She's not lazy. She's like
I'm
one
sure
of the
she's not.
hardest working people. She's like one of the hardest working people I know. You can always call Winona at like 2:30 in the morning, and she will be awake working.
not on the Pantoum, I can tell you that. What?
Well, so the other, I'm sorry.
I heard you say sonnet before. We're all familiar with sonnet. So could you tell us a little bit more about another form?
Oh,
So
sure,
we've heard about
sure.
the
Yeah,
what
let's
are
do
the
it.
other
Let's do a sonnet. So I guess what I want to
Oh,
say about these.
that's what sonnet is. Skip it.
Oh, skip
No.
You can do a sonnet. Yes, absolutely. Well,
I apologize.
oh my goodness.
So I guess what I want to say about these forms is that, you know, you want to pick a form that matches the content in some way. So, you know, the Pantoum, I'm hoping that that repetition of the lines gives some sense of something being woven together. And in a sonnet, it's so short, but it sort of circles around. It comes back in on itself. So this is a weird little sonnet that is about the way ocean waves go in circles. This is an Italian sonnet, so you know that we have different types of sonnets. There's the English sonnet, which is the Shakespearean sonnet. The Italian form is the Petrarchan sonnet, just named out of after the most famous poets writing in that form. I start with a little epigraph, a little quote at the head of the poem. So the poem is called Oceanography, but it starts with this quote that I got off of the NASA website. Floating debris has become a permanent feature of the world's oceans. The remarkable staying power of many of these objects makes them ideal scientific instruments. Objects may drift about for decades and remain intact, which has proven especially valuable in studying the speed and trajectory of surface currents. So I read this and I thought, well, this is fascinating because I normally think of that as just pollution in the ocean. Like, how could that be useful to anyone? But evidently, things that fall off ships are useful for scientists who are studying oceanography. So here's the sonnet, short. Cafe Bustelo's red and yellow cans on Spendthrift, Spindrift, Florida are spent, where last week packs of ramen noodles went as wastrel washout strewn across the sand. The gyre of current, cargo flotsam lands, bananas on the Dutch coast, nether bent, or Cornwall's million Legos, full extent of 17 years vortices, unplanned. Vicissitude or mere viscosity, all rotates. Circularity's gestalt becomes the oceanographer's decree. Container ships' continued storm-tossed fault means 80,000 Nikes dropped at sea, washed up in Washington, and clad in salt. So, you know, there's a lot of just playing with words.
I'm stuck on the 80,000 Nikes.
I got stuck on that too, actually. That was the first image that started out the poem.
Yeah, I'm like thinking like, can I pick up a free pair? Where did they just wash up on the beach? Because I think I could wash them a few times. I'm sorry. Let's talk about serious, because I went silly again. I'm sorry. So let's
No,
please
be silly. Please be silly. So, you know, the thing about sonnets is that we normally associate them with love poems because that's what Shakespeare wrote, that's what Petrarch wrote in this form. And so, you know, I was really sort of pushing against the normal expectation of what a sonnet is going to be about using this form.
Yeah, I was about to say, you went completely opposite. You said sonnet, and I was like, oh, love, heart. And then it was like, pollution.
No,
I'm like,
no, science. Yeah.
So this is
non-love.
a great contrast?
I'm sorry?
Would this be a good example of contrast?
Yes,
well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Although I'm still trying to use the form to reinforce that sort of movement of things going in circles in that study, that oceanographic study.
Which is also great because you really get the feeling of currents almost, because it goes around the world.
That's what I'm hoping. Exactly.
Sonnet,
yeah.
Until you hit 90, then it's just, that's over.
What? Nike?
Shoes? I'm joking. So can you give us like 3 pieces of advice that you would give a poet that is just getting their feet wet, like they're writing free verse and they're like, well, what else could I do? How could I be more traditional?
Yeah, so I can tell you what I did. So the many years ago, because I'm getting old now, when I was getting an MFA in poetry, I took a class on traditional verse forms, and it was the best class I took with my whole grad school experience. So I wanted to learn more after I'd taken that class. And so after I finished my degree, I decided that whole next year I would just do my own private internship in writing traditional verse forms. And so I got myself an anthology of formal poetry, which had a great appendix at the back that described each of the forms, and then gave these models of master poets who'd written poems in those forms. And that's what I used for a year. And I tried out different forms. And of course, when you start doing it, you're awkward. And you have to allow yourself the time to, mess up with these forms and fail a little bit. And, that's fine. That's part of the learning process. And so I think what I would say for advice is that this is worth playing with because they are fun little puzzles. Get yourself a good reference book, or you can look online and find out about specific forms. If you are interested in the forms of one particular country, you could spend all your time looking at forms that come to us from Italy or forms that come to us from India. There's just, every country has its own traditional verse forms. So however you want to find the forms that work for you. But I would just say, try out as much as you can, but also be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to, do it poorly at first, because it's a learned skill. It's not something we naturally know how to do. We have to learn how to do it. I think even for the poems that are not working as well, there's something wonderful that it does about training your ear to hear language differently, so that even the failures are just important opportunities for us as poets.
I really like that. I like that. Even if you fail, be gentle and know that in your failure, you're still knowledge. I love that very much. I like it so much. I'm about to write something about that. I'm about to. Oh, yeah.
She's trying to convince me to help write with her on a new book of poetry while we're in quarantine.
But I was like, don't we have like 14 of this?
15. We don't need another one.
There's never too many.
This is what I'm saying.
Okay, so I will tell you what I told her when she told me I need to come back to poetry. Oh, so Jade, you want me to be poor for the rest of my life? Because poets don't make money.
That's true.
I mean, I'm wrong. I'm dead wrong in this one, because these all made money. But that's not the point.
That's what she said, and I like sometimes, at least once a week, I gloat about it to myself. Like, I was so right. Just once a week though, just once.
Well, no one's getting rich off poetry, but that's not the reason we do it.
It feels wrong. Everyone says it's wrong if you're making money off of poetry, and I'm like, is it? Okay, Jade, finish it.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, and so I hope Ms. Roberts will come back again.
Yes.
And teach us some more about these wonderful poets. Why did it just go out in my head?
These wonderful poems and the verses that you can write in.
Yeah, thank you, Walona. But like, it's probably because my body's like, what's that? It's beautiful. So hopefully she'll come back and join us again, and we can learn some more, because I like being smart. It's fun.
Or I like her being smart and us learning, so then we can later repeat what she said and seem smart.
And sound smart, but we'll quote it. And like, no, it came from Miss Kim Roberts. Let me tell you what it was. Yeah, so that'll be exciting. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you for letting me just go on and on. As you can tell, it's a subject I'm excited about. It's dear to my heart.
So I would like to have your website one more time.
Oh, thank you.
Said in the beginning.
Yes, please. So it's kimroberts.org. I'm an entire org, just me.
Absolutely, I like it. I like the organization.
But you should be, with all that knowledge. Definitely. You're like the structural chart of an organization.
You are. Thank you so much again for joining us. And yes,
Jade, would you like to wrap
I would love to wrap this up. You can find out everything your ladies are doing on www.andwethought.com. And while you're there, take a moment, go to the ladies page, go down to the middle and see the charities that we proudly support. We know that times are hard, so maybe you cannot support them with money, but like a lot of people are cleaning out stuff right now because they have the time. So maybe you can make a donation of clothes or books or whatever you have, or maybe just your wisdom or knowledge, because that's important too. And everyone needs a little extra of that. So we thank you in advance for your consideration to do good work for them, and we really, really appreciate it. And just remember that wisdom is all around you if
you're open to finding it and accepting it. So peace and love, you guys, from Ramona
and Jade. Bye-bye.